And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to our show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and I'm coming at you live from a mountaintop in Maine. We have a very special guest for you this evening, Chris Mellon. Chris is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Minority Staff Director of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and a lot more. I'll tell you more about him later. But before our guest, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the news, as usual, in just a minute. And I want to thank everyone who supports our show. If you can't support our show and still want to listen to the whole show, you can always listen here live every Wednesday evening at 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's the same time zone as New York City. And that's at podcastufo.com. And you can jump into the chat room there and ask our guest some questions. We are also live on PSN Radio now. And there's an active Skype chat room there. So, and don't forget, we do run the full show as a podcast on the Dark Matter Digital Network every Thursday at 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time as well. Alejandro, how you doing?
I am well.
Good. Welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
Yeah. And what is going on in the UFO world as far as stories these days?
Well, there was some weird stuff that went down in May. So, and we've got these stories from Roger Marsh. These are all just strange reports, interesting stuff that's been submitted to MUFON. Roger Marsh is the Director of Communications for MUFON, and I've probably mentioned this before, but of course he contributes to Open Minds, and he writes about these strange reports and what's going on with them for MUFON. So some weird stuff. The first one I would like to tell you about, these all happened around the same period, the ones we're going to cover right now. The first one was from May 21st at about 11:30 p.m., this witness in South Carolina, Ladson is the name of the town, said she saw a red orb. And according to her, it's a common occurrence that she sees this red orb kind of cruising around her backyard. But this one is about tree level. She says that her dog is afraid of lightning, gets terrified. Your dog probably isn't, right?
You know, he's on the fence about it. Sometimes he is, sometimes he's not. Yeah.
See, our dog is kind of, and boy dogs are kind of wimpier than girls, but you got a Chihuahua, and they're usually tough little critters.
Oh,
so.
Yeah.
And he seems very confident, a very confident little fella.
He's extremely confident, even more than us, for sure. Yeah.
But this dog is not gets afraid of the lightning, and I guess during this sighting or soon after, it kind of exhibited that fearful kind of character thing that it does. Anyway, the next day, this lady found this strange silver residue in her yard, and she's got some pictures she submitted, and you can clearly see this strange residue that's left in the yard. One of my favorite pictures, however, is the MUFON investigator who went out there took a picture with his theodolite, so he has one. So it's really cool looking. It's like the Terminator's vision, where it's got all of these information about what you're seeing. But anyway, it's under investigation. They're not sure what it is or what could have caused this. The samples were taken, and they are being analyzed, or they're seeking to get them analyzed. So, yeah, that's kind of a weird one.
Now, are you going to follow up on that to see once these things once the samples get analyzed that is someone going to follow up on that so we can find out if there's anything unusual?
that'll depend on if Roger Marsh finds out what's going on and gets back with us. But often, because there's always so much going on, I plan to go find out and ask what happened, and then I don't make the time to do that. But certainly if you or one of your listeners or someone reminds me, I can follow up on this later on. Or hopefully, if there is a follow-up, Roger will post that.
Okay. Anything else happening?
Well, the weirdness continued. The next evening on May 22nd at 9:30 p.m., a witness saw a large illuminated triangle UFO. So this witness who, I've at least seen some conversation with the investigator. I guess this guy was a scientist, and this witness is very thorough. So this witness says he saw an object that he would estimate 200 feet off the ground. And he was able to drive, it was over the road. So while he was driving, he figured he was almost directly under it. He said about 75 to 80 degrees. And it looked just like a triangle. So he actually did these great illustrations. And I think I told you he was in Illinois. He was on Wilmot Road in Spring Grove. But it's really cool, these illustrations that he did. There were two red lights. There were the white lights on the corner, but two weird red lights on the side. He turned around. He drove under it. He turned around to get another look. By the time he had turned around, the object was gone. So yeah, he did these great illustrations of what he saw, and so you can see that on the story. But the state section director, Gregory Sisko, said this guy's highly credible. He's a scientist and very thorough, and he thought this is a pretty cool sighting. Now,
anyone that would actually purposely drive under an object like that, pretty brazen.
Yeah, that's funny because there are several of these stories of these people, and it's almost like these triangular craft, I don't know, it's really weird. If they're not mistaken, and that's what they really are, it's almost as if they hover over the road purposefully, because you hear so many of these stories of these craft hovering over the road and people driving under them. In some cases, people I've even interviewed recently on my show talking about them stopping their car and looking at this object being directly under it. But yeah, feeling afraid, often too afraid to get out of the car or to take pictures. So weird. It's such a weird phenomena.
And it's not just always that recent either that these are happening. I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you. I know I mentioned it quickly on one of my shows. I was helping out at an auction gallery, and this girl came out when they discovered that I'd do a show on UFOs. She came out and started telling me about her sighting. I think she said it was 1976, a triangle right over the road, stopped over the road, almost right above them, and her aunt got out of the car. So this is back in either 1976 or 79. She couldn't really remember about that time. Mm-hmm. But she said it was in the paper the next day. Other people saw it. So yeah. So it's not like a new. It just seems like we hear about it all the time. And later,
exactly,
with the guest that I have coming up, I'm going to talk about triangles because is it Michael Schratt that thinks they're possibly government? And
Michael Schratt has some theories behind that, but Sean, Jason, Kevin, he has three names. He's got this Facebook page about black triangle UFOs. He thought they were otherworldly until he was one of these people near Area 51. He saw one over the road. He stopped. He was too afraid to get out of his car. He looked up at this object. He said the lights were clearly man-made, that these were not, that advanced technology, the lights, but that the object itself hovered and then it cruised, kind of hugging the ground. And it certainly was technology that was unconventional. But that sighting convinced him that they are man-made.
What did you see, the GE logo on the light bulbs or something?
No, but he said it looked like they were filament light bulbs.
Huh. Well, maybe,
which
yeah.
And his sighting was in the 80s, and at that time we didn't use LEDs or anything like that. We had filaments, And he was certain that it was a filament and it was a, man-made type of structure.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's all a mystery. That's all.
Yep. I've got one more weird one here in May.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. May 24th, also at 9:30 p.m., so just a couple of days later, the witness and her 31-year-old son stepped outside and saw, this was in West Virginia. Clendon is the name of the town. But they also saw a triangular-shaped UFO that they felt was the size of a mountain. It started when they noticed an amber ball of light streaking in from the west. It then stopped. The witness took a picture. And then it began slowly moving to the east, and they said it moved slowly, where it took 2 hours to get out of view. That they saw 3 lights moving along, and they actually got a short video. In the video, all you see is one light, and it's nothing extraordinary. The video is really boring, actually. It's just this one light. Now, Roger Marsh says he full screened it, and in the right light in the video, he can make out a triangular form. So people can try that. And in the picture that the witness got, you do see a streaking light going across. So in the still photo, but in the video, all I could see, although I haven't looked closely and tried it at different angles and things like Roger did, so I haven't been able to see the triangle. In fact, Roger took a still from the video, and we kind of played with it, and I wasn't able to get that effect. It almost looks like the light is reflecting on something, but this is another interesting sighting.
Wow.
I do want to warn people, too, and to watch out for this fake video that's going viral. Though, remember, Secure Team 10, they're hoaxers. They create hoaxers, and unfortunately, sometimes the media picks up on their videos. And there is one out in the news right now. The reason we're not really talking about it, well, I guess we are right now, it's because it's not real.
Yes, there are a lot of people that are victim of that one.
Yep. So thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited and jealous about your interview coming up here.
Excellent. All right, Alejandro, I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Talk to you later, buddy.
Okay, so a broad brushstroke about our guest this evening, Chris Mellon. He graduated from Yale with a master's degree in international relations. He worked for many years for the U.S. Department of Defense as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Security and Information Operations, as well as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and Minority Staff Director of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. His responsibilities included review and oversight of intelligence activities, which included Area 51 and other sensitive governmental locations. He also spent over a decade on the Senate Intelligence Committee involved in oversight of NRO, CIA, NSA, and other intelligence organizations. He became the first congressional official to review all of the NSA's compartmented programs. Chris is a recipient of numerous awards, including the National Reconnaissance Office Gold Medal and the Defense Intelligence Agency's Director's Medal. Chris has had a lifetime fascination with UFOs and has recently become a board member of UFOData, which is a UFO detection and tracking. And he believes the topic needs serious scientific investigation. I'm glad to hear that, and he's putting forward his efforts. And I hope the listener has read Leslie Kane's Huffington Post interview with Chris. It's gone viral worldwide, and if you have not, make sure you check that out. And the easiest way to get there really is, if you're listening, is just plain old Google Huffington Post and Chris Mellon, and that link will come right up. It's also in our show notes. There's a link right there. Well, with no further ado, welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And you and I had a couple of conversations I thought was pretty interesting. And first of all, can you tell the listening audience a little bit about your background? But starting out, what got you fascinated in the UFO topic to begin with?
Okay, well, I was about 7 years old and attending a small school, And a friend of the principal had made an old-fashioned movie of a UFO. And the principal showed it to our entire school one night. It was a boarding school. He showed it after dinner. And you could see this very large, seemingly massive, it connoted a feeling of density and mass, but it was luminous. And it was a perfectly clear sunny day. It wasn't one of these, lights in the night sky. And you could see it gently bank and enter a cumulus cloud. It sort of, as wisps of cloud passed by, it disappeared into this cloud, and then it emerged on the other side and sort of banked and then went off out of sight. And it just, filled me with sort of wonder and awe, what could that be? And so it kind of set the hook in me. And I started afterward reading all the books I could find and so forth, and just maintained an interest ever since.
Now, any of your classmates at the time or any friends also follow along on that path with you, or were you kind of by your lonesome?
I'm not in touch with anybody from that period. That was a long time ago. And I've moved a lot of times, so I don't know if any of my classmates also had the same reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately after the movie they did, but whether that is an interest they maintained, I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand that. And at this time, when you and I had a conversation, I got to tell you, I'll just start out with one of the things that really impressed me in our conversation was you said that you're sticking your neck out here talking about this topic. And can you tell the listening audience why you're willing to do that?
Well, this is a little out of my normal lane. That's for sure. By and large, I'm concerned these days with trying to promote sort of a breakthrough in Washington on some of the partisan gridlock, and I'm working with a couple of think tanks, and I write op-eds and so forth, so this is not my normal area of focus. But some months ago, when I learned about the UFOData project, I decided to volunteer and to get involved. This topic has been sort of mired down and stuck for many, many years, where there continue to be very interesting reports and photos and videos, but nothing definitive. And I think it's a very legitimate topic. There are many very sober military and law enforcement people that have reported these sightings. And, I really think it's time to just get serious about it, try to find out what's going on. I think UFOData offers the best way to do that. And we're encouraging people to get involved with us. We've got a website you can visit for more information, UFOData.net. And if the government is not going to take this on and nobody else is, I think somebody ought to step up to the plate, and that's what we're trying to do.
That's great. And I'm really glad that you decided to join that team. I've heard it said many times, all it takes is one to have solid evidence on. And it's really amazing that there has been so many sightings. I actually saw one myself. It's something that is fleeting. And with technology, I know that, for instance, Ray Stanford was working on doing that all the way back in the 1970s with equipment, trying to get, and he did get some data. And with the growing of technology since then, it just seems like we're getting closer to getting something that will get enough information to make more people look at it. Right now there's such a stigma in general. And I'm sure. Well, one of the questions I had for you: have you had any backlash along the way about this topic in your career?
Well, I was very. This was not an interest that I advertised when I worked in the government. This was not something that I spoke about to other people until I became, good friends with them, and so it was not something that I wasn't wearing this on my sleeve or raising it often in meetings or anything. It just typically wasn't appropriate, but I did kind of keep my eye out, and because I had this interest, and from time to time the issue would arise, or I might be working with a colleague, for example, who had been the senior intel officer at Spacecom, and I remember one night working with a brigadier general who had been the senior intel officer at Spacecom in his last assignment. And so I, just, informally asked him about that. And he looked at me sort of like, "What, are you crazy?" He gave me this look like I had a third eye in my forehead. And, generally speaking, it's not an issue that is talked about or has a lot of credibility, and you risk your own credibility if you express too much interest in it. So it's just something that I quietly, it was always in my mind because I had this interest, so I would keep my eye out for things, and occasionally that would lead to something or bear fruit. In one case in particular, I had a friend who was a colleague at that time on the Senate Intelligence Committee staff, and he was doing some oversight at the Maui Optical Tracking Facility, which does space surveillance. And I said, while you're out there, there's civilian night skies, why don't you just ask them, do you ever see any strange, really anomalous stuff that you can't identify? And so he called me up. He said, I asked that question. Sure enough, there's a tape right here. And these guys got video of these, fireballs going through the night sky. And I said, well, can we get a copy of it? And I called this Air Force officer and said, sure, it's unclassified too. I'll just send it to you. And I forget, they probably sent it through Congressional Affairs or something. But anyway, got the tape. And one of the interesting things about that was, one, it showed these sort of 5 objects, 4 or 5 objects, almost like a formation, moving low in the sky, fast, but slower than a meteorite. Normally how do you see a meteorite? It's kind of a flash. Mm-hmm. And this was much slower than that, but much faster than you would expect an airplane to be. And there was a lot of heat, intense heat, probably due to the speed. And I knew there were a few other folks who had an interest in this topic. And so I decided to, ask people if they were interested in seeing the video, and a few people did. And one of the security officers who opened up a room for us to show the video, all of a sudden, I'd known this fellow for years, and salt of the earth, retired Air Force guy, completely down to earth kind of fellow, nothing odd or unusual about him in the least. And he saw this, and all of a sudden he spontaneously started to talk about this UFO sighting he'd had as a teenager with a group of his friends in a convertible car in Kentucky. And this thing was hovering over a lamppost. A telephone post, and it was low to the ground, and it was a dish-shaped object. And I had that kind of experience many, many times with people that I knew well and I trusted and respected. He had no reason to invent that, and he's, an utterly incredible person to me. And I've had the same sort of experience with different military officers and other people. And that's part of the reason that, I've continued to maintain an interest, notwithstanding the official disinterest. And So, occasionally it would arise, but, by and large, it's not something that you advertise or talk about.
Right.
In those kind of positions,
Just
not good for your credibility.
Yeah. Just something you said earlier just kind of sparked a question, and that is, you said that this particular film was not classified. They didn't have to worry about it. Now, who decides, or do you know who would decide whether a film of an object like that should be classified or not?
Well, it depends on the source. So in this case, the source was totally unclassified. The data that they were collecting there from that instrument at Maui was open source and unclassified data. So, it's derived from the source. Now, some of you might be wondering whatever happened to that tape. I had a copy of it. I can't find it, I think. But it appeared on national television. I mean, this didn't get, lost in some drawer. It ended up in the hands of Ted Koppel, who you may recall had a long-running, well-known nightly television program called Nightline. Mm-hmm. It was on ABC, I believe. It was a major network television show with high ratings, and he did a segment on this, and he played the tape and had some guests on to talk about it. So this is not a case of another one of these stories where, oh, yeah, it sounds interesting, but, how come there's nothing to back it up? That went out, and probably millions of people saw it on TV, but nothing happened afterward.
Now, one of the things I was thinking of, and I know that this came up in Leslie Kane's Huffington Post interview, was that it was kind of like, so what? Yeah, I mean, like, okay, this is unexplained, but so what? No one makes a big deal of it. What's the story with that? Is it the ridicule factor, or is there something deeper than that? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know for certain. I think a lot of it is that, nobody has this in their job chart. Nobody has this assignment of trying to evaluate UFOs. And so if something like that pops up, well, that's kind of interesting. But, hey, it's not my job. It's not my problem. It's not my affair. All these military officers, they have assignments. They're all busy, and they don't have time to do these things as hobbies, nor do they have the authority. They have, clear direction, instructions, jobs to do. And if nobody's assigned the mission or the task, even though they might find it interesting, probably nobody's going to take it on. So I don't think they have anywhere particularly to send it to evaluate, have it evaluated or say, hey, we got this, and, you're the guy responsible for UFOs, so we're going to send it to you. It just went on the shelf. And now I know there is a large feeling that, well, somebody in the government must be looking at this, because there are so many reports over the years from so many people, including military people. And indeed, it is a bit of a conundrum. And you can see in black and white reports that are available now through the Freedom of Information Act, where there are objects referred to as UFOs by Air Force officials in and over nuclear weapons storage facilities. It's there for anybody who wants to see it. It's been released under the Freedom of Information Act, and, to the credit, the Air Force has been putting this stuff out. You can find it online. There's some folks doing some great research. A gentleman named Paul Dean in Australia who has a blog site called Documenting the Evidence, UFOs Documenting the Evidence. And he and some colleagues, in this case, for example, have got scores of these memos, and they're quite incredible when you read them. And they really do make you wonder, how could the Air Force not think there's a problem here? You've got several different air bases over the course of 1 year. You've got entities that are, they're scrambling jets. They're sending security teams out Some cases, one case, the object is passing directly over a control tower. Another one's like going down right over a runway. And there's a whole lot of discussion about this. And it's happening on multiple days, and it's happening over time at multiple bases that are storing nuclear weapons. And someone's written a book about this, which I've just looked at a bit, called Clear Intent. And I'm not terribly familiar with it. I can't vouch for it all, but based on what I've seen from the Freedom of Information Act documents that are available, there's clearly something behind this. And you find quite a few of these kind of reports. I printed a couple out for the show tonight because I thought this might come up. So here's one from January 75, National Military Command Center. UFOs reported near the flight line at Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico. Security police observing them reported UFOs to be 25 yards in diameter, gold or silver in color with blue light on top, hole in the middle, and red light on bottom. Air Force is checking with radar. Additionally, checking weather and versa data. J.S. Morin, Rear Admiral, U.S. Navy, Deputy Director for Operations, National Military Command Center. That website is rife with documents like that. So I get it in terms of why so many people who are interested in this phenomenon. I mean, there's a large block of people clearly who just write it off, and they just, it can't be true, that's nonsense. There's a segment of the population, and I think most of those people are thinking that because they just haven't really looked into it and done the research. And it's interesting in the internet age when so much information is so readily available on so many topics that lots of people do that on lots of issues. And, I talk to people about global warming, sometimes friends of mine, and it was something that, I just went online and dug into the issue to try to find out what's going on here and everything. And then if you do that, you can get a pretty good handle on it pretty quickly, a pretty good sense of what the data says and the science and so forth. And even though it's readily available, many people don't. There are some good sources on this topic for people that want to take have an open mind and want to take want to look into it and make up their own minds. And I think if most people did, they'd say, this is pretty curious. This is kind of strange. And there are quite a few substantiated, well-documented reports. And in fact, there are also some very curious patterns in the data, patterns that weren't necessarily evident when Blue Book did their study back in the early 50s. So I can very well understand why people think the government must be on top of this. They must know about it. Maybe they do. Maybe there's some super secret program somewhere. Obviously, one, you can't prove a negative, right? So it would be impossible to prove that such a thing doesn't exist. And it could. I can only say that in many, many years of being responsible for looking at and keeping a book on black programs, both in the intelligence community and Defense Department, I never saw anything that suggested that, nor did I, through sort of informal inquiries. And, sometimes you learn things not because you're formally necessarily read into something, but you, through osmosis, sort of pick up something's going on. And I never had any indication of that. So I understand why people feel that way. I respect you. I know very bright, highly educated people who've looked at the evidence who believe something like that must exist. They could be right. But I never saw any indication of that. The bureaucracy, if you imagine yourself being a base commander somewhere, or at some echelon even perhaps above that. And you get reports that, we've had security teams have seen these, a luminous object, and they've rushed out there and scrambled jets, but we couldn't verify this thing, we couldn't identify it, there was no physical evidence. And even if you had a sort of a disturbing pattern of that going on, and you're a career official in a culture that doesn't accept this, doesn't want to believe it, which people look askance at that, even raising that topic, and plus you don't have answers to the questions that your superiors are going to ask you, and you don't have any ready way to come to grips with it, you might very well be tempted to just sweep it under the rug, or to just move on, or just say, okay, we're going to increase perimeter security, and we're going to do blah blah blah, and nothing happens after that, and then it gets forgotten. So the bureaucracy and the organization and structure, particularly if nobody is saddled with the mission to look into this, I wouldn't underestimate the potential for these very large organizations to avoid issues if they don't have to come to grips with them, because they're always putting fires out all the time. They've got their hair on fire. They've got lots of issues that they have to deal with. And something is awkward, difficult, maybe unmanageable, might fall through the cracks. Or just be sort of buried or left behind. If it doesn't recur, maybe we don't have to deal with it. Hasn't happened again. Okay, fine. So, I can only speak to what I experienced, right? Mm-hmm. And that was, I never saw any indication of any cover-up or, special access program involving exploitation of alien materials, or even trying to collect on UFOs or anything like that.
Chris, one of the questions that I had a number of people send in, questions last week, and kind of along the lines you were just saying about you didn't see anything there. John Alexander speaks of the same when he looked into it. One of the things I had thought myself, only because of things like Project Blue Book, and when these things are flying around in our airspace and there's enough people seeing them, you would think that there would be an interest in some possible compartmentalized section of our government somewhere. But someone was along the lines of this whole thing, whether you would share the information if you knew it. There's someone that's going to come in and say something, and that one is, while you were working for the DoD, did you sign a secrecy oath? And if so, wouldn't that bar you from letting us know that there was a UFO cover-up?
Well, I signed lots of secrecy oaths, and but none of them had to do with anything having to do with UFOs. And if there were such a program, I wouldn't have been joining UFOData in all probability. It wouldn't be as frustrated as I am by the situation we find ourselves in. And in terms of this perception too, bear in mind that people who are following this data, this issue, like you and I are interested, we're aware of this sort of constant, this stream of reports that goes on. But those reports, they're going to MUFON, or they're going to websites of people that follow this. The average person has no idea. The average military officer is not seeing that. They're not hearing that. Unless there's some very surprising, unusual incident that occurs in their immediate vicinity, in all probability, they have an entirely different perception. It's not on their radar at all. And so I think, and this is, commonplace with a lot of things. If you're deeply interested in something and you're very cognizant of what's going on in that field and you follow it closely, and the average person doesn't share that awareness. And most people in the government, I would say most, don't take the subject seriously at all, and they're not following it, and they're not seeing many of these reports, and they don't have the same sense or perception that there's a lot of activity going on.
Right. I've said a number of times in the show, too, the average person is so focused on, what's going on in their lives around them. A lot of, it's a very small percentage of, let's say, just the United States, of people that have an interest or even ponder what could be going on. It's really very, very small. And with all the information, there was a question that came up earlier on the message board, with all the information being blasted out in shotgun manner to everyone, it's amazing what young people are going through today. And that was a question that came up. How can we get young people interested in the topic of UFOs? What's your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, there seems to be a considerable amount of interest out there. I don't know. There's some different polling data I've seen a little bit of. I am not a expert in this field in terms of somebody who has been writing books about it and researching it, like for decades, like my colleague Leslie Keene on UFOData. I bring a little bit of a different expertise and perspective to the issue. I certainly follow it as I can. But again, that's part of the reason that we want to bring science to bear here. If we can collect very high fidelity, very high quality data, and we have an array, a sensor platform that may have as many as 14 different sensors, collecting electromagnetic radiation in different frequencies, testing for electrostatic discharges, distortions in the electromagnetic field, in the gravitational field, and so on, then if we are able to get that data, and I think there's good reason we could talk about this to believe that we can, then I think that will change public perception for people young and old.
Okay, well, one of the things that we had talked about earlier is, in the news, is black triangles or large triangles, that all these people are seeing triangles. And one of the things that also came up in the news is, Michael Schrad. There's a number of people that are claiming that they think these are military. And with your background and all the research that you had hands-on in special access programs and all that, what do you have to say to that claim? Well,
a couple things. There are undoubtedly cases where people are seeing, say, a B-2 bomber, and in a context that they're not expecting it, or a location or whatever. There are undoubtedly cases where that is generating some UFO reports. But in some of the other cases, for example, the famous incident in Belgium, or the famous incident in southern Illinois 10 years later, where you had multiple witnesses, you had an object. The B-2 did not take flight until July of '89. So it could not explain these sightings in the first instance. Secondly, it was my job to, I participated in the group that was keeping track of all these things on behalf of the Secretary of Defense. And I recall a specific incident that helps to keep the memory clear for me. So the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Bobby Byrd, who was one of the most powerful men in Washington because he controlled the purse strings, and he was noted and famous for many things. One, for being the Senate parliamentarian par excellence, the Senate historian. He was a champion of the legislative body more ardently than perhaps any other legislator who's ever lived. And he would tear the hide off of anybody who dared to cross him, and everybody knew it because he had done it many times. And we got a call one day from Congressional Affairs, and he had been reading these articles about this Aurora spacecraft, and how come the committee hadn't been briefed on it, because he, by law, has to be briefed on all the special access programs, has to be notified. And the public isn't aware of this. All these programs are briefed to Congress. There are multiple layers of review and oversight. I wasn't sure how much I could say about this initially, so I did a little research, and it turns out that the DoD instruction is unclassified and specifically released and posted on the web. So if you're interested in getting a sense of how these programs are managed and what the oversight mechanism is, you can look at DoD instruction 5205.11, which is approved for release. And it describes the structure and how these programs are reviewed for legality and congressional notification. And it doesn't say this, but of course it's also part of the function is to make sure that you don't have one black program in one agency or service spending money on something that is duplicating what another group is doing somewhere else, and they just don't know about each other because the program's so secret. So all those things are going on. So this call comes in, and we all kind of looked at each other and, we don't remember anything like that. And so we all ran it down to make double sure, and, contacted all the appropriate people at Air Force and Joint Staff and so forth, and, reviewed the programs, whatever. And, we replied, we told the Congressional Affairs Office, you can tell them categorically, no, without hesitation, there is no such program. We don't have anything like that.
So basically,
go
ahead.
Whatever these people were seeing in Belgium, the Belgian military, and tracking, first of all, the performance characteristics were unlike anything that we had or any technology we had. Secondly, it was definitely not. It was not something that we had, on the books. Was not us, and very curious. If the U.S. had something like that, it would be completely out of character for American military people to be flying it around a place like Belgium. I mean, the American desert out west at a test range, sure, over the ocean or, some remote area or something, but flying low and slow over a NATO ally, why would you do that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I understand why people surmise that it would be that these things might have been U.S. Vehicles of some advanced nature, but in those cases, they clearly weren't. The B-2 bomber wasn't even flying them.
Yeah. What about, there's the old saying, well, I say old because it was years ago, Skunk Works, Ben Rich said that they already have, let's see, here's a quote right here. And this, we're going to be reading some of the comments that people left on the Huffington Post interview, but this one in particular says, Ben Rich, and it's a direct quote, "We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do." So what's your did you know of Ben Rich and what's your opinion
No,
of that?
I'm not familiar with this gentleman. And if that's news to me, that anything we can imagine, we already have. That's news to me.
It is news to you.
That's not my perception.
Yeah. So Area 51. Now, I'm going to be asking all different types of questions also about Hillary Clinton as well, because I want to make sure I get that question in before the top of the hour. But so Area 51, the projects, and DARPA, their projects, nothing that you were ever aware of was like really high-end technology. You know, there's, for instance, you know, a lot of people are saying the triangles appear to be like something that defies gravity. You know, it moves much slower than a conventional aircraft, like 40 miles an hour or something like that. And how could it stay afloat? I mean, nothing that you ever saw looked like high-end technology that's not conventional?
You know, we excel and are justifiably, you know, famous and known around the world for exotic technology. And we have incredible engineering talent and incredibly dedicated people that are producing, you know, extraordinary results in many fields and in many ways. But I never saw anything that you would look at it and say, you know, wow, that couldn't be explained by just the talent of our people and the resources, and you know, this must have come from someplace else. I never saw anything that you know, involved something that was so orthogonal to, you know, our conventional understanding of science, that you would think it must have come from somewhere else.
Now, with your level of clearance, how deep could you go if you were actually looking for something like that?
Well, you know, as I say, I mean, the Secretary of Defense has a mechanism for conducting oversight of all these programs in the Defense Department, and that was one of my jobs. Mm-hmm. So, you know, presumably I should have would have known if we had, you know, a time machine or something that could, you know, travel faster than light, or in one of these programs. Now, of course, there is always the possibility that there's something completely outside the DoD directives and policies and budgets and programs. You know, maybe there's something that's so completely radical they, you know, took it out of the government altogether or something, and I wouldn't know about it. So
you mean like in the private sector?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can't say that's impossible, and I'm not claiming omniscience. I can only say speak to what I saw, what I know, and what I knew, and I never had the sense again that, you know, most people even took the subject seriously in the government. They weren't concerned with it. It wasn't on their agenda. I never, you know, people would laugh about it sometimes. You know, people at Area 51, you know, they might crack a joke about it. If you were going out there about the aliens and stuff, it was not an atmosphere or an environment in which this was an issue or deemed to be, you know, it wasn't on people's radar. It was deemed to be sort of a little bit of a, you know, wacky area. And, you know, so some people who did have an interest, like myself, weren't keen to advertise that fact or talk about it much. But again, I never, as I said in the Huffington Post article, I never had the faintest whiff of anything involving a UFO cover-up. Again, doesn't mean it couldn't be there, but I had a lot of access in the intel and DoD world because of my responsibilities. It was my job to, you know, catalog and review these programs in a fairly comprehensive way. And I just never encountered that. But one of the interesting issues, and one of the things I'm involved with more in my daily life, more centrally, is this issue of trust in government. And we are at a point where it's ebbing to perhaps an all-time low, maybe at least in the post-World War II era, or maybe at least the highest level since Vietnam. I don't know, but it's certainly we're in a bad place that way. And the fact that the candidates who are prevailing in the nomination process, or their appeal largely lies in to some degree in their anti-establishment sort of credentials and views, the gridlock we have, the money. There are a whole lot of reasons that trust is really a big issue these days and a problem in a lot of ways. And I think it manifests itself kind of across the board in this area. It's very prominent, but by no means is it limited to this topic. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. We have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to the show. What's your first name and where are you calling from?
Hi, Martin. This is Phil from Big Bass Lake in Michigan.
Oh, Phil, you're the guy that's going on a fishing trip, right?
Been on a fishing trip, yeah.
Oh, been on a fishing trip, yeah. How you doing? So you have a question for our guest?
Yes, I do. I've been listening to your guest for over an hour now, and I haven't really heard him say anything. And don't mean to be too hard, but I'm looking for something specific that this guy is bringing to the table, because I'm just not hearing anything other than, I don't know how to say it, but just conversation, but no information.
Well,
so
why don't you give him a specific question you'd like for him to...
Actually, may I address that?
Yeah, sure.
Perception? Sure. So, I don't know, what you caught in my remarks, but what I'm bringing to the table is very specific, it's very concrete, and if you're really interested in finding out the truth, we invite you to go to UFOData.net, make a contribution, or sign up as a volunteer. If you want to know...
There we go. Okay, well, why can't you just say it on... I mean, this is... I'm sorry. You just lost me. I think you just lost everybody else. I ain't giving you a dime for anything.
Well, you're interested in the subject?
That's all I wanted
to know the truth or not?
Are you
okay. Get to the bottom of this or what?
Okay. Bye-bye. No. See you.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me just address this.
I'm sorry. I don't have. Yeah. I'm not sure what the guy expected me to say.
All right.
Maybe he expected me to come on here and say, there's aliens, under some air base or something.
Yeah. What
I'm trying to do is build support for an activity that can help all of us achieve some real clarity. And if we succeed, we may, in fact, get the government also to step up. Now, if people say they're really interested and they want to, uncover this, they want to know the truth, they want to find out what's going on, that's what we're trying to provide.
Okay. So this UFOData, by the way, is a nonprofit, and it's no one's gaining any money out of it. And also, you can volunteer. For instance, I do have a banner on my sidebar and have offered to help out, and there's other UFO detection out there as well. There's UFOTOG, Mark D'Antonio and Doug Trumbull. So there's other people trying to do this, and I think, a collaboration between anyone that can help. So it's not like someone's looking for money. So I think Phil might have taken that in a different way. I'm not really sure. But I promised I'd try to get by the top of the hour the topic of Hillary Clinton. So let's just, I just want to know what your opinion is of when she said that she's going to look into getting to the bottom of the UFO topic, or UAP, I believe she put it. Also, do you think that was just some type of way to possibly get voters' attention, or do you think she is sincere? And also, the most important question I want to ask you if someone is sitting in the president's chair, can they know anything they want to know?
The answer to that question is absolutely. Here's kind of the way it works, though, and I apologize, Martin. It sounds like I'm maybe losing your audience here, but I can only speak to my experience. And anyway, so the president has far better, more important things to do than look at classified programs, of which there are a great many in many different agencies and organizations. They're typically boring. They're technical. They're things that are very straightforward. Just because something's in a black program doesn't mean it's interesting or that it's even terribly important. Most of these things are very useful. They're logical applications of technology to challenges we have, trying to improve weapon systems, trying to improve the safety of our military personnel, all those kinds of things. The president absolutely can, the DoD will salute. He's the commander in chief. And I caused a little confusion, I think. I was trying to, in the Huffington Post article, address the question of, wouldn't Hillary Clinton already know about these programs if they existed, because she's such a senior official? And what I was trying to point out is that no, these programs are on a need-to-know basis, and Secretary of State wouldn't have routinely any reason to know about most of these things. If it became pertinent, of course, they could provide a briefing. But these people are dealing with much more important things, by and large. If somebody's working on, making strengthening a tank armor or increasing, the ability to jam a signal at 23 megahertz or something like that, that's not worth their time. And it doesn't have any big policy implications. It's just something we don't want potential adversaries to know that we're doing. And so, yes, absolutely. Of course, the president can get anything they want, but it's pretty rare for them to, they're really focused naturally and appropriately at a very high strategic level. Occasionally, there might be something that rises to their level where there might be, a foreign policy issue involved or something. But absolutely, anything they want, they can get. But there's a distinction I would make between the president himself and the National Security Council staff, which number hundreds. And they will sometimes, the White House staff, ask for things and be denied. But the president, absolutely, of course, the Defense Department will salute and, move mountains to support the commander-in-chief.
Right, and I think that anyone that takes that office basically has the tiger by the tail, and she probably or may forget that she even said that by the time she gets her hands full, if she does become president, that is. We have the one and only Lee Spiegel in the chat room from the Huffington Post, and here's he posed a question earlier, but I'll get to this one that's up there right now. He says, Chris, please speculate on what you think is freely operating in the skies around our planet that has for decades outmaneuvered all attempts to engage them in the sky, and speak to the issue of how many commercial airline pilots have had close encounters, but they're encouraged not to go public about it because it might hurt their career.
Well, I'm reluctant to. I agree with Lee that there's a lot of data that, as I look at the data, it paints a similar picture. I don't think there's any doubt that there are a lot of airline pilots who've reported. I know that there are a lot of airline pilots and military pilots who've had sightings and reported them, and it's all very mysterious. And that's why we're trying to build support to deploy some technology. It would be great if the government were doing this. That would be my preference. But since they're not, and nobody else is, we're trying to do that so that we can actually bring high quality, first rate scientific technical data to bear on the issue and get past this very frustrating impasse of these continued reports, which are, fire the curiosity, but never go anywhere.
Right.
And never lead to any resolution or clarity. I'm reluctant to speculate. I don't rule anything out. I think what we need is data. We need more and better information to answer the question he's posing, and that's what we're trying to do.
So he also adds this just now. So please speculate what your inner senses might tell you what might be going on.
Well, I wish I knew. I really wish. Believe me, I'm burning with curiosity ever since I was a kid. This fires my imagination in all kinds of ways.
Well, what do you think about the extraterrestrial thought?
I don't see any reason to rule that out whatsoever. And I say that for a variety of reasons. One, we've made unbelievable strides in a fairly short period of time. When I think just about my own grandfather riding in a horse and buggy and not having a phone and being born before there were airplanes and all of that. Yet I think, we don't know what dark matter is. We don't know what dark energy is. That's 95% of the universe. We haven't been able to reconcile quantum mechanics with general relativity with regard to the remaining 5%. We have already got vehicles that have left this. A vehicle has left the solar system, and others on Mars. So everything we're learning about the universe and the entire trajectory of our cosmological understanding is one of 180 degrees from where we started, which was that we're at the center of the universe and we're unique and everything goes around us. Everything we learn at every step of the way seems to suggest more and more that we're a very commonplace solar system and a very commonplace galaxy. There are trillions of planets in this galaxy. And so, I don't think there's any reason to exclude that possibility. But I want to get to the point of really getting beyond speculation and trying to really answer the question.
I'm glad to hear that. When that article came out in the Huffington Post, it went viral, and there's a ton of different articles out there now everywhere that people have kind of gone off of that and made their own speculation. And some of the things I know in conversation with you, one of the things we just cleared up, and that is the president who's sitting in that chair can get any information that they want. But anyone lower than that, that position, it's possible that they cannot access certain things.
Let me try to be a little bit more clear, perhaps. So, within the Defense Department, of course, the Secretary of Defense can get anything he wants. The deputy can. There is a chain. I mentioned that DoD instruction, and it stipulates the process of how these programs are managed. And as I mentioned before, they are all briefed to Congress, to the appropriate people. So there is oversight. It's not as though this is a world. Some people would argue that we have too much oversight. And in some areas, I think they're right. There are things that we are unable to do quickly and effectively, sometimes on intelligence matters, for example, because we have so many echelons of review and so many attorneys and so much coordination. We have committees in Congress that have staffs that are far larger than any other government in the world. The Intelligence Committee has a staff that's twice as large, at least, as I recall, as the Armed Services Committee, even though the budget that they oversee is about 1/10 the size. So there's a lot of poking around, a lot of review of these budgets and programs. And certainly the president and people in the appropriate chains of command and the appropriate positions can get access to this information.
Mm-hmm. Now, Chris, what were some of the things that people sort of took out of context in that interview that you'd like to clear up? Just a couple of them, if you would.
Well, the one I think the first one was the one you've already touched on.
Yeah.
About Hillary Clinton versus the president. It was funny. There was an article in a British tabloid that said, former DoD official says president won't be told about UFO cover-up or something. And I had to laugh because, first of all, I said, as far as I know, there isn't a cover-up. And I never said the president couldn't get access. I said that the Secretary of Defense wouldn't typically, because they wouldn't have a need to know in every compartmented program in other departments. So I'm glad. I hope that we're able to clear that up at least.
Sure. Now, we talked earlier. I just posed, I think, one question from one of the comments that were left, and a couple of them are pretty harsh. One of them,
yeah. Oh, maybe I deserve it.
No, here's one here. This is a comment left on that post. It says two things about this Chris guy. One, either he was never allowed access to UFO type files or material evidence, or two, he's lying about what he knows and is humoring the board of UFOData in order to gain access to what they know and their files in order to design misinformation or steal evidence of ET.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure how I can, what I can say to prove that I'm not some kind of a, mole or something. Let me see here. I don't know what I can say, really. I mean, you can sort of believe me or not. Fact is, as I said, I never saw anything indicating that there was any kind of UFO program. I understand very well why a lot of people think there must be. I have recommended publicly that there ought to be. I specifically recommended in the Huffington Post article that NORAD be tasked and, be put on the hook. They have some tracking data already that's not being examined from this standpoint, to the best of my knowledge. I think a couple of people at the President's Council of Scientific Advisors can be cleared to get access to all of that data. I don't think anybody in the government is trying to cross-correlate it with data that goes into civilian organizations that are collecting sightings and cataloging them. I really wish there was some sort of government activity. It is possible, of course, as the person suggests, that I didn't have access. It is always possible. There's an old saying in the intel community: you don't know what you don't know. You never know what you don't know. And sometimes, just when you think you're at the center of the onion, that you're the innermost layer of compartmentation, you find some other little trap door in some other compartment. But I really don't. If there is any such thing, all I can say is it's completely outside that mechanism that the Secretary has for monitoring these things, as far as I know. The fellow who was responsible for Special Access Program security policy was a direct report to me. I took my job seriously. I never saw anything like that or uncovered anything like that. So I think if it does exist, it's been pulled off into some separate world. That's a possibility. I can't say that's not a possibility. That could be. But I'm not aware of any such thing.
Now, when you were involved with some oversight for Area 51, do you actually physically visit these places?
Yes.
Oh, so you were actually there?
Yeah.
Did you see Bob Lazar?
No, I didn't. Because I wouldn't know what he looked like at that time either. But it's kind of interesting, and I'm not going to talk about. There's a bit of a slippery slope issue here in terms of not crossing into inappropriate areas and not causing problems for former colleagues in terms of generating press requests that they have to respond to or something. But yeah, when I was there, I never, again, there was nothing that, people kind of laughed about the idea that there was a hidden UFO facility or something.
Yeah, Groom Lake, I think that's the area of that where there's supposed to be these, according to Bob Lazar, in the side of the mountain, these doors open up and there's, I forget.
But, this would be, maybe when if Secretary Clinton becomes president, maybe John Podesta will take Bob Lazar and a group of press people on a plane out there and say, okay, Bob, show us the doors. and maybe they'll just, get some camera crews and a film crew and say, okay, Bob, show us the beef and let's get a vehicle and drive down there. I don't know. I mean, who knows? But let me comment a little bit more, actually, if I may, in terms of this issue of, a cover-up. If there were such a thing, maybe it would be for good reason. I mean, the people that I worked with, they're not sinister people. They're very patriotic, hardworking Americans. I'm sure many people on this podcast have friends and family in the military. They're really exceptionally patriotic, hardworking. I know I worked with the current Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper, really good man. I worked with the current CIA Director, John Brennan, used to attend regular meetings with him. These are good people. These are people, if somehow, and I very much doubt this, there was some program they knew about and it was being kept under wraps, I could only imagine that, it would probably be for good reason, and I could imagine why that would be. Imagine, let's entertain this scenario, which I am skeptical of, but just entertain it for a moment. Imagine you are the president, and somebody comes to you in some secret briefing and says, Mr. President, we have this remnants from this alien spaceship that we captured, and we don't know where these people are from, or this, maybe it's, autonomously controlled or something, but we have this technology, but we don't know who's behind it or why they're here, what their agenda is, and we're not able to provide any reassurance that if they had bad intentions, we could stop them. Now, what kind of responsible person would go public with that? When you think about that, all the kids, all the public, the elderly people have enough problems. If you're the person who's responsible for the safety of 350 million Americans, would you really want to come out with some half-baked thing and say, drop this hand grenade under the dining room table of every family in America and say, oh yeah, we can't protect, we don't know what's going on and we can't really protect you and we don't know what they're doing, but oh yeah, by the way, there's some alien race visiting the planet, have a nice day. Really? Come on, think about it. That's crazy. Who would do that?
I think what you just said there is probably very close to the truth. That's my opinion. I think that's
possible. I mean, yeah. I don't know. I say the people that I knew at high levels. I mean, I see, Clinton's been asked about this, Bill Clinton and President Obama and stuff. They seem to laugh it off and shrug it off. And I knew, worked very closely with the former Secretary of Defense, and I don't for a minute believe that he knew about something like this or was involved in it. But you can't rule it out, of course. I mean, there is a bit of cognitive dissonance you get when you look at these Freedom of Information Act requests, for example, and you see the Air Force guys scrambling on the one hand, and these sort of incursions and reports and the Belgian incident, et cetera, and you feel like, how could we not be, getting on this? So, anything's possible, I suppose. But again, if that were the case, and if somebody were to come out with that sort of a half-baked revelation, think about the firestorm that would result, and for what possible productive purpose. I mean, the press, the Congress, our allies, everybody, it would just be an absolute firestorm. And for what? And what would it accomplish?
Also, there'd be so many things.
I'm not saying that that's what's going on. I'm not saying, I have no reason whatsoever to believe that is true. But I'm saying for those people who consider that scenario, I guess part of the reason I'm saying this is like John Podesta said publicly, the American people can handle the truth. My question would be, if you don't know what the truth is, how do you know that they can handle it? You know, what if they're flesh-eating arachnids or something? I mean, doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. We just had someone try to call in, so I'm going to take the call right now. Caller, you are live. Your first name, please. Where are you calling from?
Lou, Rancho Cucamonga, California.
Hi there, Lou. Do you have a question for our guest, Chris Mellon, tonight?
I do, and I apologize. I tuned in late, and I tuned in kind of in the middle of the conversation you were just having. And I wanted to call in to clarify, at least admittedly for me. My understanding is technically the president has a right to know all of the information. There might be rogue employees who withhold information, but is that your guest's understanding? Was that what the point? Pardon me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. But there are people out there who say there are black programs and the president doesn't have a right to know what's going on. And that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, again, is that the point you're making or one of the ancillary points you're making?
Yeah, let me try to be really clear about it. You know, I apologize. I gather you got in a little bit late, but I mentioned earlier there's a DoD instruction 5205.11, which you can find on the web, that outlines the process by which the Defense Department provides oversight of all special access programs, at least in theory.
Right. Okay.
And how that is done, and they're all reported to Congress. And there are multiple echelons of reviews. So the Air Force reviews all of its special access programs, and then they go to this committee, and there's another level of review with a number of people on this committee looking at it from a legal standpoint, an acquisition standpoint, a budgetary standpoint, a congressional notification standpoint. So, of course, we have programs and activities that we can't put in the public domain because they would be shared with our adversaries at the same time we shared them with the public. If there was some way to share it just with the American people and ensure it didn't go beyond that, you know, that would probably be what we should be doing. But there's no way to do that. So we have this balance of trying to be able to do things and still provide oversight and accountability. And I think it's a reasonable balance, and I think it works reasonably well.
Yeah, okay. I've had discussions, and not necessarily pleasant discussions, from the other side, somehow saying that there are programs out there that the president does not have a need to know about. I can't imagine setting up a government that way. Again, there could be rogue employees who choose not to reveal information, but that's not legal.
Well, that's a good point. And so that's what the Iran-Contra affair was about, right?
Exactly.
You had people doing things without the knowledge of the president, allegedly, or Congress. So there was not a single elected official in the United States government who knew that these people were launching an independent foreign policy initiative that was contrary to the president's stated policy.
Right. In fact, it was the admiral who admitted that. It was, I can't remember his name. Was it
Poindexter? Poindexter.
Yeah, he specifically admitted that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing can happen, and that's when those kind of things do happen. Of course, they do undermine people's trust and faith in the government, and they often result in even more intrusive oversight. The intelligence committees were established in the wake of revelations about the CIA conducting LSD experiments on citizens and all this kind of thing. And when that finally got in the papers, it led to such an outcry. You had these hearings on Capitol Hill, and they decided we need to have a select committee on intelligence in East House of Congress to, review the intelligence community annually, their budgets, their programs, their activities, et cetera. So there actually is considerable oversight. And
that's the church committee? That's the church committee from...
Absolutely right. The church committee, it was one of the church committee recommendations, correct.
And I thank you for repeating your points. Like I said, I tuned in late. We're on the exact same page, and it was just good to hear. So thank you for your time.
Hey, Lou, I appreciate the call. Thanks. All right, Chris, I want to get to a couple of messages that came up on the message board as we were going along. First of all, I did promise Lee that I would ask this. He wonders what actual need-to-know level that you were given and whether or not you wondered if there were those above you that actually knew more.
All right, this is a little awkward, but so if you are a member of the Special Access Program Oversight Committee, you are what they call a super user. Mm-hmm. That means you're cleared for all special access programs.
Okay. That was a quick, easy answer. Good. Now, one came up a couple of times. One person in particular wanted to know if you even know what this is. I think I've heard of it. The Bolender memo.
I believe I'm familiar with that. Yes.
So, what's your view on that?
Well, if I understand this correctly, this is a memorandum in which a general indicates that he saw some materials that were sent back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base were not the weather balloon materials that were shown at the press conference, if I've got that right. He was saying there was sort of a bait and switch. There was some other stuff sent back to Wright-Pat, if I recall this correctly. And my sense of that was it's interesting. I believe it's authentic, but I'm not sure what conclusion to draw, because that would appear to be consistent with two hypotheses. The Air Force, which claims they, came clean in the 90s on this and revealed this Project Mogul, which was a high-altitude experiment trying to detect nuclear weapons explosions in the former Soviet Union, which was a highly classified program, and it's possible that he might have not have been cleared for that, and they rolled out this balloon or whatever for the public to cover it up, and then they took the components from the classified program and sent them back to Wright-Pat. And so it's conceivable that that's what he saw, or alternatively, maybe it was something else. Maybe there was some debris from a wrecked a crash of some kind. So to me, it's interesting, but I'm not sure that it is dispositive of anything.
Right. Okay. So let's see another question that came up there. Did you have any evidence of any sort of government type organization that works externally to the main government? I guess that would be like a private sector oversight? Well,
the government relies to a huge degree on contractors. And I mean, to a degree that I think the public generally doesn't appreciate. And oftentimes that's for the better, because the contractors are often more efficient than having government employees perform those same functions. So I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but there is a huge contractor base, and obviously, a huge percentage of the government budget goes into the private sector and so forth. If now, when you have DoD programs, for example, like Boeing, I visited their plant and assembly line where next generation aircraft were being made, and the DoD. Anytime you have a big acquisition program of any kind, there is a mountain, an excessive volume, I would say, of oversight, regulation, acquisition milestones, etc. There's encyclopedias, literally, of acquisition regulations. And so it wouldn't be easy to hide something of a really spectacular nature in that domain and keep it outside of government oversight. But there, in theory, you could have something. I suppose. I mean, the Iran-Contra affair was interesting because there's an example of where people were running an operation completely off the books, and they were making money. They were engaging in trades. They were exchanging, weapons, anti-tank missiles, and taking money and using that to fund a covert action program in Nicaragua to fund the Contras. And there was an example of something with rogue employees running a black operation off the books, completely outside of any of these oversight mechanisms I've been talking about. Mm-hmm. So it's not impossible. It's happened. But
I wouldn't be surprised if it's happened more than that myself.
It could be. It was so outrageous when it happened, and the issue really was at a point like that. People do have a reason to start asking. What kind of a democracy are we really? If people who are not beholden to any elected official can run a completely independent foreign policy and covert actions. I mean, that was crazy.
Right. Here's another question that came in, and that is, what do you think about Blink 182 Tom DeLonge's claims when it comes to the government and UFOs, such as, this is a direct quote, I have 10 people that I'm working with that are at the highest levels of the Department of Defense and NASA and the military, and this is in regards to the UFO, maybe disclosure or something he's claiming.
Well, I think he's a creative genius for one thing. I've enjoyed his novel, and I think Blink 182 was a great band in their day. And if he's got some advisors working with him, I think that's great. I think they could probably help him to make what he's doing, and I think that's his intent, to make it appropriately. I think he wants to be authentic and also cast the military, our military people, in the positive light they deserve to be cast in. So I think he probably wants to, avail himself of some real expertise as he goes along. I think that's great. Okay.
We'll see where that leads to. We have a caller. Caller, what's your first name and where are you calling from? Caller, hello? Can you hear me now? Okay. Caller, if you can hear me and I can't hear you, you're going to have to do a Skype test call and check to see if your microphone's not working, because I'm not hearing anything. So I'm going to hang up on you, try your Skype test call, see if you can figure that out, or call back perhaps. Okay, he is claiming that he is getting somewhere and, that something may come out. So that will be interesting, whatever happens through that. Another, going back to the comments that were left on the blog, on the interview that you did in the Huffington Post. Another one is Hillary Clinton knows the truth about UAP. She was involved for 3 years in the Rockefeller Initiative. She and Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Governor Richardson, and a couple of others worked with Lawrence Rockefeller to tell the people the truth. Something happened to stop the plan. John Podesta wants the truth out now. I do want, John Podesta's name came up a lot of times tonight, but first of all, in that comment, and then after that, what do you think about John Podesta and his claims, or his initiative?
Yeah, I don't know John Podesta personally. I've never met the man. My impression of him from afar is that he has long been somebody who believed in transparency in government and letting the sunlight in, letting the sunshine in. And I applaud him for that. I think that's true. And I think we're at a point where, as I mentioned, we're at a real low point in terms of people's trust of their government, and the country's getting dangerously polarized, and that weakens us and divides us. And so I applaud, his general philosophical sentiments. My concern is, frankly, that this is going to be a setback for people who want to really understand the UFO phenomenon and what lies behind it. Because my concern is, based on my experience, that they'll find there is no, that Bob Lazar was not correct, that there is no UFO cover-up in all probability. And so then some press release to that effect will be issued, and people will laugh it off. And people who are disdainful of this whole subject will, as I see, I told you so. And then we'll go, it'll go nowhere, and the whole topic will have less credibility and interest. So I wish that people were formulating the request a little differently to the candidate and to her advisor, in the form of not, just releasing the alleged cover-up documents, but making a commitment to trying to get to the bottom of the issue. If that requires, if they get in and find out there's something and they release it, okay. But if not, then that would require assigning some responsibility and some resources to undertake some research. Not a lot at all. It can be done very easily and simply, but I think that would help to ensure that this doesn't become sort of a dead end or a big setback for people that are interested in this topic.
Okay, we had a couple of questions come in, and this one here is, do you know of any contingency plans by the government in the event that an extraterrestrials do make themselves aware to us in a mass scale, if they were, so to speak, to land on the White House lawn? Are there any? I think I've actually seen a documentary where they said there actually is something in place. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of anything like that. That's news to me. I've seen there's some think tank sort of groups that I gather have examined the issue to some extent, and some of the people associated with SETI, for example, have thought about how would you break that news to the public and what impact might it have and that sort of thing. But no, I'm not aware of anything like that.
I would think, I watched the movie Independence Day. A few people have out there. I would think that it would not be a bad idea because, we are floating in space. Anything can happen. For us to have a contingency plan, if kind of like a worldwide contingency plan, if we ever had to defend ourselves in any type of way or something, it just seems like there would be some type of program. I mean, it's kind of like someone not ever prepared for their house catching on fire. It's just kind of like something that could happen.
I think to most government officials, that seems so remote that, in terms of their list of priorities, it wouldn't make the cut. But it's interesting that Reagan and in one of his UN speeches and others have talked about, speculated a little bit on the sort of unifying impact that might have if we did face a common threat. I suppose, I would, there's so much increasing danger and instability in the world today that, looking for things that help to mitigate some of those differences and bring people together is a good direction to be looking. As a general matter. But I don't know that in the absence, again, for something like that to happen, I think you'd have to have some compelling evidence and information. If we had it, that could have that could change everything, that could have a really profound impact. And we're trying to see if that's possible. That's why I joined this organization, and we're hoping to really move the ball down the field. And science has evolved a great deal since Project Blue Book and so forth. We have a lot of sophisticated, precise instrumentation that can be brought to bear if there are enough people interested in doing it.
Right. Lee Spiegel posted another question up there. Who's ultimately responsible to the citizens of Earth regarding UFOs? Too many people put all the responsibility of UFO information on the shoulders of the American government. Who should speak for planet Earth, in your opinion?
Well, nobody can speak for planet Earth. We're not there yet. We have the United Nations, and they don't really speak for. They have very little authority, very little clout. They don't really. We're still tribal and balkanized to a large degree, and this is one of the troubling things when you see the trends with what is going on today with Russia and with China and North Korea and the Middle East. The world that we thought we were moving into after the former Soviet Union fell apart and the wall came down, and there was a honeymoon period. Everyone thought, it's all going to be liberal democracies like us around the world. We're all going to get along. Things are going to be great. Very optimistic time, and things are going in a very decidedly different direction right now.
Yeah, that's
very, very concerning. And the potential for military incidents is growing as both of these dictatorships in China and Russia are trying to foment nationalistic impulses to strengthen their control and power. And, it's a very concerning situation.
After spending some time there, I don't want to get into politics too much, but after spending, almost just shy of a whole month in Russia and trying to talk to a few people over there, they think kind of the same thing about us. From what I can gather, we feel like, first of all, they think that we're full of BS, and and they think that Putin is going to straighten us out on by telling the truth. Again, I don't want to get into politics too much, but sure. It was interesting to hear those comments from people. Okay, so I'm glad you're not adding to that.
Yeah, I was. I that's much more in my sweet spot than UFOs probably in terms of my day-to-day activities, but I won't go there.
Okay. Now, a question that came in also from one of the listeners during the week was, what do you think about the rumors, and according to some documentation, that Eisenhower is actually communicating with ETs?
Yeah, I don't know anything about anything like that. I'm really not in a position to offer any insight, I'm afraid.
Yep, no problem. Again, a lot of these questions would come in, and another one came in that said, with regards, and I think you may have addressed this at least partially, with regards to historical UFO sighting reports over military bases, nuclear weapon sites. Do you think there are any agreements in place to alert counterparts in opposing countries of these events occurring?
I doubt it. I'm not aware of that, and I strongly doubt it that we would seek to do that.
Because of the nature of nuclear warheads, basically.
I mean, there's a hotline, and there are mechanisms through our embassies and so forth to try to avert misunderstandings. In general, should they begin to develop, but nothing specifically related to UFOs or anything like that.
Yep. Okay. I wanted to just make sure, because the time is just flying here. I kind of thought it would. Another one came in, says, Grant Cameron used to believe, as you do, Chris, that it is unlikely that Obama knows anything about our government's secret UFO programs. Cameron has, however, changed his beliefs on based on a number of reasons, including but not only Ben Hanson's analysis. I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, of Obama's interview with Jimmy Kimmel. He I don't know if you know anything about that at all. Are you familiar with Grant Cameron's assessment or anything?
I'm really not, Martin. I passed by a website with a little information about him, and I'd like to go back and learn a bit more, but I'm not really in a position to comment.
Yep, no problem. Here's one I think I discussed with you on the phone briefly when we first talked. And what is your opinion on Chase Brandon's claim of seeing a file box with Roswell evidence?
I'm not familiar with the claim, and I don't know what evidence that would be a reference to.
Well, here, let me just ask this then. Is it, according to his claim, would the government actually put on a file box Roswell evidence? I mean, wouldn't they number it or like have a whole bunch of numbers or something instead?
It does sound kind of odd to me. I mean, just, knowing the way bureaucracies work, that if you had let's take a crash site of not an alien crash, but say a Russian satellite or advanced reconnaissance vehicle or something. People wouldn't be leaving boxes lying around saying, evidence from the crash, and they just left it in the corner. Generally, it would probably be, pretty well tidied up and accounted for and squared away. But I'm not familiar with that claim.
Lee Spiegel was involved actually at the United Nations years ago, back in 1978. It was kind of a milestone for the time, and there's still information out there about this. It's really very interesting. And this is just a comment from him, and he knows that the UN definitely doesn't speak for Earthlings. That was going back to when you were talking about that. Okay, now let's see. We have some comments coming in. I'm just trying to get them. Do you think that there is any? This is one that came in. I think you kind of addressed this, but I think it would be redundant to bring it up about a compartmentalized part of the government. But you mentioned the UFO flap in Belgium. Are there any other, and a couple of other things, are there any other cases that you think are really solid as far as not being able to explain what they are?
I think there are quite a few. That one was particularly, to me, compelling because there were so many different witnesses over such a sustained period of time. Ground-based radar, air-based radar, police and military officers, and a full military investigation. The Belgian Air Force General has addressed this on the record, made it very clear this was not a case of mistaken helicopters or balloons or something like that. And I know people that have talked to the Belgian military. I know somebody who was on a NATO visit and discussed this with them directly, and they said the same thing to him that they've said publicly. So I think that's a really stellar example of why there's a phenomenon here that should be taken seriously. But there are so many cases. I remember when in college, I did a research project on this topic for a physics professor.
Really?
Yeah, and he consented. He was an open-minded individual. He consented to let me do an independent research project on this. And at the time I was doing it, there was a lot of UFO activity going on in New England. And there were also some very prominent cases going on in the papers globally. But some of the cases, where when you know somebody, it sometimes makes it more real or more concrete. Mm-hmm. So there was a local sheriff that people in our community who went skiing up Sugarloaf knew. and his name was Hensby. And I started a scrapbook then, which I still have. I've got it in front of me. And Hensby and his wife were driving, and they came across a group by the side of the road. And they were coming back from a function in the evening, and Hensby was a teetotaler, didn't drink at all. And in this article, which was in the United Press International, Officer Hensby says, one of the guys told me, quote, "Don't go up over the hill. There's a UFO up there. If you do, you're going to witness something you won't want to see." And then they drove off. And I could see they were terrified. Well, he continued with his wife. When they approached the hill, the object hovered on top of the hill and lit up the whole hill, so we sat there and watched it. I saw a bright light. It was probably about a telephone pole high, and it was stationary in space. He waited a few moments, tried to drive over the hill. It advanced, quote, "It advanced toward us, then stopped in midair. I then backed up 30 to 40 yards and then stopped. 3 times he tried to pass. Every time the object came up again, it was bright enough I couldn't see in front of me. We had the feeling it didn't want us to go up there, and they turned around and reversed course." And, that's just was a small local example. But when those kind of things happen to people that you've met or or, for example, a Navy friend of mine who told me about a naval instructor who he was present on the runway when this guy landed, and a UFO had just flown completely around his jet.
Wow.
And so there are these cases that are ones that are very useful for trying to establish, something that's well documented with multiple sources of information. But sometimes the ones that, that I kind of feel the most personally are the ones that are personal, where the person individually, you know that guy, and he would not lie. You just know in your heart that guy is telling the truth of what happened to him and what he perceived. What it was, another question. But he's telling honestly what happened.
Yeah, I do agree. It makes totally the difference when you know someone personally. We do have a caller waiting. Caller, your first name and where are you calling from?
Well, thanks for your indulgence. It's Lou from Rancho Cucamonga again.
Oh, you're back.
I'd like to throw out an observation that is not my own. I can't take credit for it or blame. But it regards Chase Brandon talking about the box. And the commentator said that the box is a euphemism in intelligence speak, that there really wasn't a box. He was just trying to say that he saw evidence wherever. I just thought it was an interesting comment. I certainly can't vouch for it. So I throw that out for your consideration.
Well, thank you.
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. Again, enjoying the show, by the way.
All right.
And I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks for your call. Okay. All right. So we only have I think 3 minutes left. Not too much. So keep that in mind. And I think that's probably going to do it for calls. And I do appreciate the people who have called in. And what is your? I think we sort of addressed this, Chris. But another message up there is. So what is your take on the ET hypothesis? You think it's a possibility, right?
I don't see any reason why we would exclude that. None whatsoever. In fact, if you look at our technical trajectory, last month we launched the first crewless naval warship with transoceanic capability.
Amazing.
Autonomous vehicles, we already have. The Voyager spacecraft is outside the solar system. It doesn't even have a propulsion system on it. But there's a group right now that is putting together a plan to send some sensors to the nearest star, Alpha Centauri. And Stephen Hawking's involved with the group, some other people. And they're for real, and they're engineering people. It's trivial to imagine a civilization somewhat more advanced than our own, at a minimum, given what we're seeing with artificial intelligence, being able to spew autonomous vehicles out. And if it took them 100 or 300 or 500 years to get somewhere, it doesn't matter to a computer, right? And, you know, these kinds of things are already on our horizon. Why we would think that if there's no reason, there's every reason to think that there's life elsewhere. How frequently, how often does it become highly sophisticated and technical? All those questions remain to be answered. And I'm somebody that is of the view that, you know, the best way to approach this is scientifically and empirically. And my colleagues on the board of UFOData, that's kind of what unites us. That's what we're trying to do. We're all tantalized by the various possibilities, and we're eager to get answers. But absolutely, I think, you know, there was interesting. Physicist Brian Greene made the point that in an infinite universe, and we think it is infinite based on what we know about the curvature of space-time, every combination of atoms and molecules must not only recur, but recur infinitely. So there must be an infinite number of other advanced civilizations.
Yeah, very good. Hey, we are totally out of time, Chris. I want to thank you so much.
My pleasure, Martin. I'm sorry to disappoint people who were hoping I would come out and say that you know, we've got the aliens underground, but perhaps we do, but I'm not aware of it.
Right. All right. You take care.
Thanks a lot.
All right. All right, everyone. So thanks so much. That's it for the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're listening this far, you're either listening live or you're supporting the show, and or you're listening to the Dark Matter Digital Network on Thursdays. Thanks a lot. And our guest next week is Jeff Willis, spelled with an ES at the end, no relation. And we're going to be talking about Phoenix. So that's coming up next week. And again, I want to thank everyone for listening. This is Martin Willis saying keep your eyes to the sky.